Live from the chicken wing capital of the world, Buffalo, New York. You're listening to the Child Care Bridge Podcast, your source for the best tips, tools, and tactics on how to market and grow your child care center, ensuring total domination. Total domination. This is the Child Care Bridge, and this is your host, Michael Tasner.
Hey there, and welcome to this week's episode of the Child Care Bridge. I hope you had a wonderful New Year's celebration and that the first couple of days of 2024 are off to a great start for you. Today's topic is one of the questions that I get asked on a very regular basis that has a lot of interesting answers. And that question is, how do I differentiate my center? And in particular, how do I differentiate my center in a crowded market? The reason that last piece is important is that when there's a lot more competition, standing out from the crowd gets to be a little bit more of a challenge. When there is a fewer amount of childcare centers than there are parents and kids in need of care, it makes your life a lot easier. It's one of those out of necessity where you almost have to enroll at one of these particular locations. And often there are some centers, not nearly as many as I used to see, that have a wait list around the block that just have so much pent-up demand. And if that's the case, you should definitely be opening multiple locations. But this concept of differentiation is an interesting one because I could give you a lot of different answers. And the reason I'm going to give you a couple of different answers is that there's not one specific way that you should only focus on. It is one of those where you have to have a couple of differentiating factors. Now, there are some centers that I've seen within a 1 mile radius that there might be 10 centers, 8, 15, literally within 1 mile. There are some centers where we've seen a center here, and 5 doors down, there's another center. And if you're all going after the same type of family, it gets to be very, very challenging. But that's where you can start with the differentiation. So the first thing that I like to look at before I look at making any changes or deploying any specific marketing or anything is I want to laser in on who is the best family that I can currently serve. Who are those dream families that we love working with, the kids that were making the biggest impact on their lives? And that answer is going to take you down a couple of different paths depending on where you're located and what you're currently doing. You might find that you are best suited for kind of blue-collar workers, that their schedules are pretty much a straight 9 to 5, but the price factor is among one of the most important for them. They want an update maybe once a week, but they just are looking for reliable care. That could be one audience. You could have a completely different audience where you're going after doctors and dentists and engineers, for example, and they might be demanding and wanting more frequent updates. They might want the best technology at a center. They might want to make sure that you have STEM and computers and even artificial intelligence at this stage, which is a very interesting topic that I'm going to discuss in probably the next week's episode. But you have to really look at, with where you are today, without making any changes, who are those best types of families and kids? And from there, I want you to take a look at some of the other centers that are in the area. Now, a lot of people will say, well, let's make the competition irrelevant. And there's this concept of a blue ocean. And it's an amazing business book, The Blue Ocean Strategy. And it talks about there are red oceans, which are kind of really bloodied waters, so to speak, because there's lots of competition and everyone's going after the same type of audience. And then you have blue oceans where families, or in this case families, but you're not necessarily competing with anyone because you have your own open waters, for example. The reason why that doesn't work as well as I would like is that there are only so many ways a child care center can differentiate themselves. And if I were to rattle a bunch off, which I'll do, there's not a ton of blue oceans that haven't been tried before. So, for example, if you have a traditional daycare, that one I would definitely consider a red ocean. So traditional daycare, for example, you've got your curriculum, and maybe there's nothing fancy. It's a standard curriculum. It's a 8 to 5, for example, or a 7 to 6, or one of those. You most likely have a summer camp. Maybe you have some additional extended hours. The extended hours is another area that can help to differentiate you. You've got Montessori. You have Reggio Emilia. You have STEM-based. You have Spanish immersion or other languages. I have started to see a couple, not a lot, but I've started to see a couple of trilingual preschools, which are very, very interesting, where you're being promised that your son or daughter will walk out speaking 3 languages. Depending on where they're located, a lot of them have been Spanish, French, and English. I have seen a couple of centers that are specific to a different language, Japanese, Korean, for example, Chinese, where they're teaching a particular language. But you want to look at what does the competition around you look like. If you're a STEM-based center, and there are 10 other centers around you, and they all have the best technology, they all are promising STEM-based, what do you start to do? And if you don't have some of that knowledge set, and you just think, well, because I've got the best technology, because I'm STEM, I'm not really competing against anyone, I'm in a league of my own. But if you would have done a little bit of research, you would know that that really isn't the best place to differentiate. So step 1 is you really need to nail down current status quo. Who are those best families, the best kids that you know you can deliver some amazing results for, and you're also going to love working with them. Because what I don't want to do is if you're set up to be a traditional daycare, and then you start to put a bunch of really demanding parents that want hourly updates, and they want to be able to log into a camera at all hours, and everything is technology-based, you're not going to love working with them. They're going to have attrition. You're going to get flustered and frustrated, and you're going to get into that cycle of really hating what you're doing. So nail down who you really love working with. Step 2 that I just talked through was size up the competition and start to put them in buckets. So look at the radius that you feel you can attract families from. I always argue that with really good differentiation and really good marketing, because that's the other piece to this that we haven't discussed in this episode yet, you can pull from a wider area. A lot of centers, when I ask them, show me where you think your targeting should be. And they'll say, well, I don't think anyone's going to drive more than 1 mile. 1 mile is rarely the case unless you're in an extremely, extremely populous city. 1 mile is unheard of. And the chances are also high that the families are going to be driving in from other areas, and maybe they're going to be working within that 1 mile, but you need to figure out where they're driving in from. The first place to do that is by looking at your current enrollments, and then you map them, and you can start to put them on a map and see where and how far they're actually driving from. But don't make that particular mistake of assuming that you've got a very specific area because you've never marketed to or expanded out. We have a lot of centers that even in markets that are semi-crowded can pull from 10 or 15 miles away. Families will drive additional time if you have what they're looking for. If you're able to have that right match, they will drive an extra 5, 10, 15 minutes. So you've now looked at the different centers and you've put them into baskets. Montessori, Reggio Emilia, faith-based, Spanish immersion. You've got all these different baskets. Then I want you to take a look at where do you fit versus where everyone else is. And if you start to find a nice fit there, so maybe all the other centers are traditional daycares in the area, and you are Montessori inspired, or you are heavy on STEM or Spanish immersion, that is going to be one of your key points of differentiation. Because there's going to be a lot of families that specifically want STEM, Montessori, etc., that they don't just want a traditional daycare. There are a lot of families that specifically want a faith-based center, and even more so, some of them are demanding specific faiths, not just Christianity, for example. So when you've been able to size up in this populous area all the different centers, if you're on the side where yours is quite different, or maybe there's 10 different centers and there's only one other center that's like you, we now have something to work with. If it's the flip side where you're a traditional center and there's 6 out of the 10 that are within a mile, they're all traditional centers, we're going to have to move to the next stage. And we're going to move to the next stage regardless, but the next stage is going to require a lot more of an investment. So when you've started to look at kind of how you compare at that high level, the best way to start to differentiate is to outmarket the competition. I need you and your center to become omnipresent so that when parents are seeking you out, or seeking out care rather, you are showing up everywhere. They're going to Facebook, you're running ads. They're going to Google, they're seeing an ad, and then you're also ranking in the Google map listing. You're also ranking on page 1 of Google. They visit your website, then the next day they're on Fox News, and they see one of your ads. They go to one of the mom groups, they ask about childcare, they see your information. They go to Yelp, they read a bunch of great reviews. Their friends start talking about you. Maybe they'll see you or hear you on the local radio or even some of the local TV. And they're going to start to have that happen consistently. Not just they see one ad, but the best way, before having to make any modifications to what you're currently doing, is we're going to outmarket the competition. Period. My fundamental belief with everything that I train and everything that I do is marketing above all. Marketing as the pillar to your entire business. If you're going head to head against the same types of centers and you're comparing apples to apples, and everything else is the same. You both have qualified teachers. You both have good food, for example. And you start to go down that list of, are there some other areas that you could differentiate yourself? Cameras, food, the types of teachers, the tenure to the teachers, your curriculum. You start to look through all those different things that might make you a little bit different. That final one is price. And it's one of those that I hate competing on in this particular industry, because what a lot of centers do is they will call all the other centers in the area and they'll figure out where they want to put their tuition. And usually it's in line with what everybody else is doing. Either you're going to have to be at the higher end or you're going to have to be typically at the lower end. The only other way is you out-market them. What I'm forecasting for this year is a lot of childcare center sales, a lot of childcare centers closing. I think it's going to be a wild year. But what I love when there's turmoil in the industry is that the centers that will win are the ones that are marketing all day, every day. Because what ends up happening is they become omnipresent, but then people start seeking out your brand. And that's the key to all of this. The whole point of more and more marketing isn't just to drive more leads and more enrollments, but rather we're trying to get people to actually know, like, and trust your brand. Because then even if everything else is the same, your tuition is very similar, this daycare is charging $1,000, you're charging $1,000. But if you're consistently marketing, you're putting out good, helpful, authentic content, you're becoming that local authority in your particular area by deploying the stuff that we teach you. They're going to seek out your brand. So rather than typing in preschool near me, daycare near me, they're going to type in ABC Childcare, for example, by brand. And then it's not going to be as hard of a sell. You're not going to have to say, well, we do things much better than this other center down the street. And in reality, everything is almost equal. You're going to be able to talk about all the great things that you do. Even if they're the same as everyone else, you've built up that brand equity. You've built up that trust so that they're not necessarily going to be shopping the centers as much. So irregardless, if you are the only type of center in your area, that obviously is a differentiating factor, but you still need to outmarket everyone else. Because the other piece to all of this is that, let's say you are a trilingual preschool in your area. What do you think you're going to have to do from a marketing standpoint? You're going to have to convince parents why this is something they should consider. I'd argue that your marketing is actually much more challenging than anyone else. If you're the only game in town, the nice thing is if there are a couple of Montessori schools, they've done some of the Montessori branding for you in a way of kind of introducing people to what Montessori is. But I can tell you that in my area, for example, I can't think of a Reggio Emilia center or even an Inspired center. So if I were coming into my area and I could say, great, I'm going to differentiate by that's going to be what I'm going to hang my hat on. The types of families that I want are going to be people that care about nature and they want their kids in the outdoors for as long as possible. I'm going to have to do a lot of educating initially. So my marketing is going to be even more and more challenging, especially if I'm in a populous area. But once you start to establish that omnipresence aspect, you start to establish the brand to you and your center, it's game over in a good way. My mantra for you for this year is to out-market everyone. This is the year to double down, triple down on your brand, to really plant some more seeds for the future, the next couple of years, to really grab that market share so that you become the main game in town, so that you can expand to more locations because that brand is there, the pent-up demand is there. And then when you move to a location that's somewhat near where your existing one is, it's very easy to translate to another location because you've built that brand. People see you everywhere because you're omnipresent. That is how you stand out in a crowded market. You outmarket everyone, period. Let's have an amazing 2024. I greatly appreciate you tuning in every week. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Good morning, good afternoon, and good night. See ya.